Tyler Markham.
Here.
Mark Ferry.
Here.
Steve Balich.
Here.
Amanda Cook. Here. Jacqueline Trainier. Rachel Ventura.
Present.
And Tom Weigel.
Here. All right, we're all stand for the pledge. Mark, if you want to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first up we have approval of minutes from August 13th.
Motion.
Second.
So moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion has carried. So then we have new business. Our first case is zoning case ZC-19-027, which is a zoning map amendment from A2 to A1 in Green Garden Township in County Board District number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Zoning case ZC-19-027 takes place in Green Garden Township, as was mentioned, and this actually concerns two separate parcels which have been consolidated, and the applicant is looking to rezone these two parcels, which are currently A2 to A1. Combined together, they are deficient in lot area for the A1 zoning district. 10 acres is the minimum, and these two parcels are a little over 9.7 acres. The applicant did apply for a variance to bring that into compliance should the A1 get approved, and that was approved at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last week. So the map amendment is here before you today, and will go also before the board. As you saw in the staff report, staff is recommending denial of the map amendment request. Basically, within this area, which is roughly with a half-mile radius, the zoning districts are A2 or E2. So we're talking agricultural residential area. There are very minimal A1 parcels in the surrounding area. The trend in development has been towards taking A1 parcels and rezoning them towards estate residential or these agricultural residential zoning districts, and then subdividing them into smaller parcels. So you have typically, 5-acre parcels that are E2. This allows for a residential use with some accessory farming or keeping of a couple of horses, for example. The trend, again, is moving towards this estate residential, and this request would be pushing it backwards towards A1, which is why staff is not recommending approval of this. Of the agencies that were notified, you saw in their packet, Green Garden Planning Commission and the Green Garden Board both recommended denial of this request. We did also receive a legal objection to this zoning case. So as you saw and with the memo that was included, that will require a 3/4 majority vote of approval by the county board or 20 votes of yes in order for it to be approved. At the public hearing that we had last week at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, there were 2 objectors present. One was the adjacent property owner who had filed that legal objection, and then we also had County Board Member Mustis who was present. And PZC did recommend approval of the map amendment, but by a 4-3 vote. And that concludes staff's analysis.
Rachel?
Is there any reason why this wasn't suggested for them to go E1 or E2 instead?
So they are A2 right now, and well, I should say both 2 parcels are A2. So A2 is a zoning district that we don't rezone new parcels to. It was basically supplanted by E1 and E2, so estate residential. So being A2 right now, it allows for residential, it allows for the accessory farming. There's no need for them to rezone to E2, for example, because A2 is already what E2 and E1 are.
Jackie?
Why do they want to be A1? Do they really want to farm there?
It was really not made clear to me why they were pursuing the A1 zoning district designation. Certain applicants will say because we want to operate this type of a use, or we want to do, whatever it may be, which is only allowed under A1. The applicant did express that they want to build a building, which would be permitted under the A2 zoning district. They would be allowed to build a storage building.
Do you think they're wanting to farm this land?
There is some hay farming going on already, which again is allowed in A2.
It's allowed.
So that's already allowed.
What, excuse my ignorance, what's the difference between an A2 and an A1 then, other than size?
Sure, so A2 is, we call it agricultural residential. So it allows for the residential use with like the accessory farming, but it also has a limit on the number of farm animals. So you're allowed 1 per acre, 1 animal unit per acre. So for example, they could have 9 horses. So it is agricultural light, almost like a farmette, if you will, a hobby farm. A1, again, is agricultural. So those are large-scale farms, potentially, still allow residential uses, but there is no limitation on the number of farm animals, for example.
So that might be the reason that they want to raise 20 pigs or something.
They did not say that they wanted that.
No, I know, yeah, clearly they didn't tell you what they wanted to do. Then, as one of my colleagues says, that's never good. So, okay, thank you.
Linda?
So they have 2 parcels currently. Are they trying to combine them simply to qualify for A1? Or is this building going to traverse the 2 lines so they need to combine? And then how would we handle that in zoning?
Sure, so they combine them together to come closer to being the 10 acres to go the A1 routes. Under A2, if they wanted to build a building right in the middle of those 2 property lines, they would have to consolidate them together. It's just a form that you fill out with the mapping and planning office. So they could keep them separate if, it builds on each separate one, but if they wanted to build on the 1 parcel that just has a garage, it'd have to be consolidated with the residential parcel. Or if they wanted to build straddling property lines, they have to consolidate them together.
So since they're very vague about A1, if we decide to vote this down, it is still possible to combine them for a building or something like this. It's not cost prohibitive or...
Correct. We could have a building permit applied for, right now, for the A2 parcel, and it would be approved if it met, all the criteria.
Great.
Is the petitioner present? Would they like to come to the podium and explain?
If you want to explain. Sure. Coming down.
Morning, everyone. Would it be okay if my dad sat?
Yes.
That was good, okay.
We'll grab one of the chairs.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Peter Weir. I'm Tony's son. I've been speaking on his behalf. He is the trustee beneficiary of the ownership of the property. And I was told that my time is limited, so I like to talk a little bit, so I'm going to get right into it. I would like to answer your question, Ms. Jacqueline, about the intent. The intent was purely stated, and I just would like to say is this case and derivatives of it have been being heard since March with planning and zoning, and it has evolved into a map amendment. But it first initiated with a temporary use permit for 2 semi-trailers that are being used there for hay storage. Because in years previous, we were told because of the 2 parcels being separated, A2 does have a limit as far as accessory building. And at that point, back in 2014 and 15, we were told that we're not be able to rebuild a building. The property was purchased with 1 semi-trailer on there, to which last September my father purchased another one just to kind of increase the storage. With there being a complaint filed with the county, that brought us to a temporary use permit, that sort of thing. At the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting in March, it was actually recommended by one of the commission members to combine the properties and go to A1 zoning, which the A1 does take away that accessory building limit as far as square feet are concerned. It does still have a percentage. You can't build more than 20% of the property, which makes sense. You don't want somebody to build there. In addition to that, as this has evolved, there were some things through some due diligence and research that came up. One of them is parking. For example, in 2012, the Secretary of State changed how it license plates vehicles. To give you an example, a Ford F-350 dually pickup, the GVWR now exceeds 12,000 pounds, which pushes that plate to a letter F as in Frank. This is something that came up in Green Garden, to which one of the gentlemen there told me that for 30 years he had been buying these trucks, and that's not true. I did bring the evidence from the Secretary of State and the Will County Code. So in a nutshell, a pickup, which is normal and ordinary, and I'm not talking like a giant U-Haul truck, this is just a pickup, would not technically not be allowed to be parked on the property because the plate now exceeds that. I have those printouts, I'm happy to share them. It's things of this nature is why we're looking for it. And as far as the area is concerned, I did bring some additional reports which I recently found. Staff had conducted a, can I pass this on? This is just highlighted where it shows you the Class D specification. The second is just from forward, shows you this GWR with the plate rate being half a mile as a case study in this particular area is not far enough in our opinion. Our property is about 1,400 feet in length. That's over a quarter mile. So if you're looking at a radius of a half a mile, you're literally looking at the neighbors around us. So in lieu of that, with everybody that's been notified, there was 10 notifications. We do have our property owner to the south, which is the one that has filed a legal objection. And understandably so, that is the only person that has a direct conflict with this and is directly affected or unaffected by it. At the Planning Code Zoning Commission last week, we did have our other neighbor, our northerly neighbor there, which also shares that 40%. He was there and he wasn't able to be here because of work. He did provide us with a letter, but it is noted that he was there last week. And I can answer any questions you have. I could probably talk for the next hour, but in respect of everyone's time, I would just ask that the Planning and Zoning Commission, having heard this and the intricacies of it since March, I would ask that today this board upholds their approval as of last week.
Mr. Griswold?
The documents that the applicant just tendered to the committee, I'm going to ask to be taken out as part of the record.
I was going to ask if we could give these.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you have a copy of the middle one, but that's fine. That's something I have on my computer.
Okay.
And just so this is what we're talking about as far as the pickup truck.
Just a pickup truck.
Yeah.
With the back seat.
Correct. Well, actually, this doesn't even matter. This is one that I found a pretty clear picture.
I'm not too sure about the car stuff yet, but as far as the auxiliary buildings for the hay storage, are there any amendments or solutions that if we have an A2 that some variances or something could be allowed so that they could store their hay? Is that something?
Yeah, and I did speak with the applicant about that a variance for accessory building area is a very common request that the Planning and Zoning Commission sees. It is also much cheaper and a much quicker process, so that would provide it to him as an option.
And does the attorney have any suggestion about the vehicles?
No. This is all new information. I think our staff isn't even aware of this information. I'm not 100% certain on that, but.
So the vehicle issue was brought up at the Planning and Zoning Commission, but that was the first time that I had heard of this. And I would think that, the committee here and the Planning and Zoning Commission, the full board, if they feel that this is an issue, which again would seem to be applicable to all properties perhaps, not just this one specifically, then a text amendment would be in place to review the license plates and the weight limits of those vehicles and where they should or should not be allowed in which zoning districts, because I think that's broadly applicable as opposed to just this one specific property.
And the question was raised about the variance. I think that question will probably be directed better to the applicant as to why that wasn't sought.
Yeah, that was my.
Do you have any answer for that?
I'm sorry, was it about the variances? About the accessory buildings?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So to answer that is because, again, there's the small conveniences like this parking that get entailed with the A1 zoning. Not to waste the committee's time, but there was, since my father had purchased the property just shy of 10 years ago, there has been an unfriendly neighborhood or neighbor relationship, to say the least. And it has to do with seemingly little things such as the parking, which everybody that lives anywhere in Green Garden probably doesn't even notice, such as my neighbor having the kind of pickup that would apply to that. And what has happened over the course of 10 years is Will County, being a complaint-based county, has been summoned out to the property, which we are visiting with a civil attorney at this point to as far as a civil action. But as far as enjoying the property action, to give you an example, our septic tank was being repaired. The county came out. They were there for a matter of 8 minutes and they take a look around. But as Ms. Hurl has stated to me and documented that if Will County receives a complaint, they are obligated to come out. With my kids, I have 3 daughters. My dad wanted to do a sandbox for them. Had a truck deliver a small amount of sand. The county came out again to ask and inquire about it, and we're talking sandbox half the size of that table. And it's this over a period of a decade, which goes on and on and on, which seemingly nobody ever has a problem with. There's nothing going on there. There's no animals there. There's a 12-pound dog that's on the property. And this is why, you know, the other neighbors that are directly around us, this doesn't concern anybody. I've spoken to 4 of them personally, and they have no objection to it. Did not write a letter, did not come, except for 1. So, you know, what we feel and what we've talked about since March is that this allows to just kind of pull the blanket over that stuff and just be done with all of that. You know, nobody's building anything. The village of Frankfurt, the town of Frankfurt had no objection unless it's commercial or industrial, which this is not. It's not going to change the dynamic of the neighborhood. I have a report showing, you know, Will County 76% A1. This is not in the middle of downtown Frankfurt, you know, things of that nature. But.
So sadly, though, I think that, you know, we have to do due diligence too, following our own ordinances.
Sure.
But even if we gave you A1, I don't think your neighbor's going to drop their vendetta on you. It sounds like you've got a different axe to grind there, or they do. But what we could try to do is solve these other problems for you in a cheaper manner, perhaps. You know, like the auxiliary buildings, getting a variance for that would be a lot cheaper. I agree with Janine that this is new light to us, so we're going to have to implement this across the board, which will also solve your problem. You won't have to be doing variance for the car, because we'll have to be looking at that. But unfortunately, if you've got a neighbor that's going to pick on you, I don't know that doing A1 will help with that, and it does have precedence on our board to do that.
Sure.
I hope you understand.
I do. And so, I was just going to say, as far as setting a trend or anything like that, that was brought up also in planning and zoning. And the last case of this was in 2015, Janine, is that correct? Or was it the 11 acres that were switched over from, it was 2015 or 2016 was the last case of this. There was no other cases that have even been brought to the board's attention. So that's just my evidence is it's not going to, you know, it's not like if this gets passed a week and a half from now, you're going to have, you know, 12 cases mounted up. As I said last Tuesday, I don't even think anybody would notice as far as the neighborhood is concerned. So in terms of being in pattern, I do have aerial photography too, which was submitted last week and has to be resubmitted as I was told today. But it doesn't change the characteristic of it. And I do very well respect your point, but given that as an example from 3 years ago, not a single case until ours has been brought to the board's attention.
Steve?
As far as the trucks goes, I thought that when we did the licensing, you know, businesses out of their house, people that do work out of their homes, they're allowed to have trucks that were allowed with tools in them that were like cargo trucks, you know, larger than a van, larger than an F-250. That we passed that it was all right to do that for your personal business.
So I just want to, I'll stand in 1 second. I just did want to say the case that the applicant's referring to is basically to like the northwest of this property. And it was a large, you know, 11.25 acre parcel that was zoned A2, and they went to A1 in order to do the stabling of horses as a primary use. 2 years ago, the most recent case to my memory since being here is ZC 17049, which was actually in Frankfurt Township. It was in Mr. Justice's area. The applicant had 2 A2 parcels. He wanted to consolidate, rezone to A1. That case was denied at Land Use and Development Committee, and then the applicant ultimately withdrew that request. So that's the most recent one to my memory. In regards to the vehicles, previous to January of 2018, we were actually more restricted. So I believe it was 8,000 pounds, up to 8,000 pounds was what was permitted in the residential zoning districts. We increased that to the 12,000, and we switched it to be licensed plates.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I thought that we were allowing more than that we went up to.
We did go up.
I thought that we were allowing cargo vans as long as they weren't, I won't use this. doesn't like me.
It's a D
Didn't
point.
we say that if it were a business, they had say they had a carpenter business or a plumbing business, they were allowed to have a truck in their driveway that is larger than an F-250 with a box, a big box on it. Then we cut it off at, I forgot that we went by license class C's, you know, and we said that, I think it was the C plate.
You went up to a D.
D. So
This
now,
guy's truck's set up.
so if that's, when we argued that point, the argument was to allow something like for that. Not, we just didn't want a big 30-foot truck in the driveway. But an F-250, because of the weight, obviously, it's more. Well, that should be, we should have probably made an exemption for, instead of the plate size, the weight size, the weight of it.
Dave?
After extensive and thorough discussion at the committee levels, all through public hearing with the board determined that the maximum would be a D as in David plate. So perhaps, you know, if the board decides to reconsider that, to readdress, you know, the plate classifications that are allowed as the board's prerogative. At this point in time, again, after thorough discussion and analysis, it was the board's decision to go to the D plate.
Right, I did that, but we didn't think of an F-250 as being 350.
Okay.
We didn't think of that as being 250.
And perhaps that's what I'm
I mean,
saying.
that's why we included trucks with boxes that were 10, 15 feet.
That's the same, the board decides that, you know.
We're going to bring this back to this specific case here. So Jim?
Okay, can we have an exemption on this with the rule?
Jim, go.
I would get, is the applicant done speaking?
I did.
Does anybody have any questions?
I don't think there's any other questions. So Jim, and then we're going to go to the people who signed in.
So, the reason I ask is I'm not here to go back and forth with the applicant. That's fine. You know, I oppose this. I went to the public hearing and expressed my opposition. Let me start out with the basic premise that it's not even 10 acres. It's less than 10 acres. And our ordinance clearly says 10 acres or more for A1. I realize that we went through variance. I think the planning and zoning granting that variance, but I think it's a very bad policy to go under 10 acres in A1. You know, it's hard, I think, sometimes for people to understand because it has A2, which no longer, as was mentioned earlier, it's no longer even a zoning classification. It's no longer in existence. It was replaced by E1, and I guess E2 also, the state residential. And under a state residential, you are allowed some additional, granted additional by right activities, a little farm action, you can have some animals and so forth. You know, 1 acre, you know, I have to look at the chart, but, you know, technically on A1, I think you could probably have up to a couple hundred hogs on it, 10 acres. So remember, I'm not really concerned about the applicant's use. A1 is A1. He mentioned it. He mentioned it at the public hearing that this would probably stay in the family. There's a trust and so forth. You can't guarantee any of that. You know, so you're introducing basically a heavy agricultural use in a residential area, and it's going to continue to trend residential. I totally agree with staff on this. You know, I think they presented a good case for denial, and I think we should deny it. You know, I think it's a bad policy to take small parcels and put them under A1. The applicant, in my opinion, can accomplish all what he said he wants to do, and including the license plate. I do think we could look at it. I do think maybe an F plate in these areas is probably appropriate. If it's 12,000, I agree with Mr. Valley. We should probably look more at the weight.
than maybe just a classification. So there's remedies to everything that the applicant claims he wants to do. I don't think I mean, everything he wants under A2. And to set the precedent of putting heavy agricultural, and I'm gonna maybe maybe a little bit of a stretch, but this would be like taking an industrial, this would be like taking I-2 and sticking it in the middle of a residential area. We wouldn't even consider it, right? And so this is not that much, I mean, this is not that much different as far as I'm concerned. I would ask the committee to vote to deny based on it's a bad policy to do so, and there are remedies for all the applicants' needs, and including the license plate. I think we should like take another look at it. I ask you to vote to deny based on this bad policy, and I do think it negatively impacts the area overall. If it's not heavily impacted by the current owner, it'll be the next owner. So I would ask you to deny.
Thanks, Jim. All right, we did.
One final statement.
I think we've already had enough time to speak. That's one of the rules. So we have other people who signed up to speak too. So
Sure.
So thank you. So first up, we have signed up. There's Greg. I'm not even going to try your last name. Did you want to talk about this case or the next case or something else? What's that?
Completely different.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't have it, so I wanted to make sure. So I'll get back to you for something else. So we also had, for this case, Sharon, again, I'm not going to butcher your last name, so you can come on down and just state your name. You can go back up if you want.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Watch this stuff here. Watch this stuff.
My name is Sharon Stack. I am here with my husband, Thomas. We are the landowners to the south. Our address is 24028 South Center Road in Frankfurt. This all started with two 55-foot trailers on the property. We put in a complaint. We really didn't want to look at those. We've been on the property for more than 30 years. It's not something I wanted to walk outside my house and see. So we did file a complaint. We were told that it was going to be temporary, a temporary land use for hay storage, and that it would be 3 months out of the year, and then they would file every single year. They wanted it annually. Well, to us, that didn't seem like temporary. It seemed more like permanent. So then we went into a barn. They needed a barn for storage for the hay, which my husband and I talked. We are all in favor of a barn. If that's what you need to store your hay, then yes, go ahead and build your barn if it'll get the 55-foot trailers off the property. So he needed a barn for storage for the hay, but he also has, just so you know, he has an attached garage, a barn. He has a garage on the second parcel, and he has a pavilion. And we understand, he said that's not sufficient for what he needed, so he needed a new barn. And we are like, okay, if you need that, that's fine. He needed space for his four-wheelers, for his mowers, other equipment, fine. We are, again, all in favor of a barn. We think it's a good idea if it'll get rid of the 50-foot trailers. But now we're at a rezoning, and we don't understand a rezoning need. The area is A2. My husband and I have an F-350. When we got our F-350, it's a 1996. That's what we needed to haul our horses, so we needed that. When we got rezoned to A2, they kind of just fell in place. You guys aren't going to make me sell my vehicle to, the vehicle was going to stay. So yes, we have that vehicle. Are we in touch with what our neighbor's doing at all times? My husband's retired, so guess what? That's what he does. He looks and he sees. Part of our property is in a flood zone, so anything that happens near the property, greatly affects what's going to happen to our property and how things roll downhill. So we are on track. We keep an eye out for what is going on. We want to know what's happening. So they have a very large front loader. When they get on and start moving, we are concerned if they're going to start moving the earth. Are they going to hit tiles? Or what are they doing with the septic? Is it going to flow down to us? When they put in their driveway, how is that going to affect how water flows down by us? We just want to make sure that everyone that needs to be involved is involved and that we're making the right choices on both sides so that there's not a problem. I did file a formal legal objection in regards to the zoning change. I did go to the planning meeting at the Green Garden Board. They did vote against. I know that the staff member here, development analyst, is also recommending denial. We stand with them. We really feel that the neighbors should be able to build what they need to build to suit them in an A2 zone. And so that's why we are here. Do you have any questions for me or for my husband? Anything that we can answer for you? Okay, thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.
Alrighty, so with that, is there anybody else who wants to speak on zoning case ZC 19-027? Keep it brief, Jim.
If I could just make one other real quick comment, which I meant to make the first time. The lady mentioned it, and that is that Green Garden Township and the Green Garden Plan Commission also voted to deny. And let me say that townships, the township of Green Garden is really the only local government, and they are closest to it. So please keep that also in mind. The local government did ask us to deny.
Thanks, Jim. So with that being said, is there a motion for zoning case ZC?
A motion to concur with the denial from the planning commission.
It should be in the positive, so the motion, you have to make to approve it, and then if you don't want to approve it, you vote against it.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the zoning map amendment from A2 to A1. We'll call the roll for this one.
Tyler Markham?
No.
Mark Ferry?
No.
Steve Ballich?
No.
Amanda Cook?
No.
Jacqueline Trainier?
No.
Rachel Ventura?
No, but I encourage the applicant to reapply for the building variances.
And Tom Weigel?
No.
All right, so the motion did not carry. It will go to the full county board on the 19th. So,
Can the staff prepare the truck information, both from the class perspective and the weight limit perspective for the different zoning areas out there? I think that's important for us to look at.
all right, so number 2 under new business, we have zoning case ZC-19-047, which is a special use permit for a truck terminal in Joliet Township, which is a vacant property on Manhattan Road in County Board District Number 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Zoning case ZC-19-047 takes place in Joliet Township, and this concerns an I-2 property, which is 5.7 acres. It is a large property, but due to the presence of a floodway and a floodplain on it, that is going to really limit where the development can occur. It'll be basically to the northern 2.5 acres, so the area that is closest to the roadway, closest to Manhattan Road. Your staff packet had some information, traffic studies from 2 other truck terminals that are on the same road, so just to the east and just to the west. Those traffic studies were done in 2015 and 2017. Due to the very limited number of trucks that the applicant is proposing for their business, staff didn't believe it was necessary for them to complete a full traffic study for this. The applicant currently only has 6 trucks. They are requesting a maximum of 15, which is one of the conditions of the special use permit. They do not see their business growing beyond that. Should it grow beyond that, then they would be coming back to request a new special use permit. Excuse me. So staff did receive a comment from an attorney for the property owner directly adjacent, which is a split zone commercial and agricultural property. And that that person requested a specific berm fence combination for the screening. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not accept that additional condition as a requested condition. So that is just something to be aware of. I do not see the attorney here today or that adjacent property owner, however. Yes?
To the east or to the west?
It is to the east. So it's like the property to the southeast, basically. We also had 2 additional people speak at the public hearing. One just had some questions about a street that was never improved, that is actually adjacent to the property. And the other person was from the other truck terminal who had some questions about how the construction of their property may impact his property. So no one objected to this request. Staff did not receive any objections from any of the people who were, of the agencies that were notified, except for Joliet's. The city of Joliet, as you can see that I had outlined in the staff report there, they were concerned about development being in the floodway, the floodplain, which again, it is not. We have our stormwater resources ordinances, so they will not be developing in the floodway or floodplain. The city also, they had concerns that a sort of more detailed site plan was not presented as part of the application. Again, with the very limited number of trucks, staff did not feel it was necessary to have a very detailed site plan at the time of application. That will, of course, come through the site development permit process. The city also had comments about the tax impact that they would not be receiving. Should this ever be annexed, they would not be receiving, a lot of tax revenue from the site. Staff recommended approval with the 2 conditions, and the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval with those 2 conditions as well.
We have people sign up, so do any committee members have questions or any committee members?
Yeah, I have a question. I was hoping that Herb could just maybe speak about this. It's in his district, and Herb.
Mr. Brooks, would you like to say anything?
I would. I was waiting on my turn. It was going so fast there.
Well, we just want to put the motion on the floor so we can have discussion.
All right. Mr. Chairman, this property, there's a street called White Avenue that runs north and south right in the middle of this, where this business is going. I have spent a lot of time walking up and down White Avenue when other businesses that came in that area with the residents. I've been to their homes. I had meetings. Every time one of these businesses come to that area, they come to my office and I go over there. It's not far from it. However, I was sharing with Janine a little while ago, this one has really went under the radar. Nobody contacted me. I've got no phone calls. Nobody said any concern at all. The berm that you mentioned, Janine, came up with all the other truck stops that have gone in over there. And that's always been a big concern then with the noise, with the site and all that. But this time, Mr. Chairman, I have not heard from any residents with any concerns. And what I see in the packet, apparently there is no problem with this proposal.
Any members, any questions? All right, we did have somebody sign up to speak on this, Gabriela Sanchez, who is the applicant, I believe. Would you like to say anything or just questions?
I signed up.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Yeah, with the berm.
And why was the 3rd condition not added?
So the Planning and Zoning Commission, they felt that we already have screening regulations in place. This was a very specific screening that that person was requesting along that property line. And they, without knowing the cost of it, they felt that this would be a rather costly undertaking for the applicant to do that 3-foot berm with that 8-foot fence. They were also concerned about drainage and the topographical conditions of the property, if it could even accommodate something like that. So they did not want to burden the applicant with doing that very specific condition.
Okay. But by doing those conditions, that is what protects the drainage, it is what protects the noise and some of the pollution. So the reason we have those requirements in place
required to do screening of the, where the trucks are parking outside. So that is going to be required under the ordinance. The Planning and Zoning Commission just felt like the 3-foot berm with the fence might be an expense that the applicant.
Reading look like
Amanda has a question.
No, that was my question, what the screening typically looks like.
Typically for our truck terminals, they would put up a fence with some landscaping because they want that extra security with the fence. But really any combination, a dense hedge, a fence, a wall, you know, we have options that are available to them to do.
Any other questions? All right, there's a motion to approve on the table, and it's properly seconded, so all in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? So the motion does carry. So that's it for new business. Next up under other business, we have amending section 155-7.30 of the use table and 155-9.170 A1 mobile home of the Will County zoning ordinance. Ryan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This matter has been before you twice before in draft form. On September 3rd, 1 week ago, at the Planning and Zoning Commission, they held a public hearing on this text amendment. There was nobody there to speak on it. No comments were received in any fashion through email or mail or fax or however. So before you today is that text amendment, which is modifying 2 areas. One area is the use table showing the special use permit would be needed in the C6 zoning district, and then the section on mobile homes was modified to allow a mobile home in the C6 district for caretaker security purposes with an approved special use permit. So those are the 2 changes that will be before the committee today. If you approve them and move them forward to the board, that would be final action at the county board, and then they would become law.
Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns?
I do have a question. I was just wondering what brought this forward. Was there a specific
Okay,
case?
so what brought this forward is in the past, prior to the 2012 zoning ordinance update, which was a comprehensive update, there used to be allowed, it was allowed to have a watchman or caretaker residence with a special use permit in some zoning districts, and that was removed at that time. I guess the thought at that time is that maybe that wouldn't be the best use of property. I know one of the biggest concerns with that was in our industrial districts, because then what would happen is people would seek this permit and then they'd get it, and then the next thing you know, they have families going to school here, the school bus route going through the industrial park. So that's part of the reasons it was removed. This amendment only allows it in the C6 zoning district, which is the recreational zoning district. I mean, we have C6 throughout a lot of Will County, but this is mainly like down south where these are, like Graywood Recreational Club and places like that.
Okay, so now I have another question. I didn't know what C6 was. They're making a big deal about this right now, mobile home park in Kendall County, Hideaway Lakes.
Hideaway Lakes. This is one trailer for the person that actually watches over the entire property. These C6 zoning districts do allow different types of campgrounds, and, travel trailers and park trailers, but there are limits on that. They're not mobile home parks.
And it's special use only.
Yeah, this is only for the watchman or caretaker. This has nothing to do with a campground or a recreational ground. It's only for one trailer for the watchman or caretaker.
Nobody's going to live in it.
No, they will. They will live in it.
The watchman will.
What's going to stop the watchman from having some children? The watchman might be a watchwoman.
And it's certainly possible that could happen. And like I had mentioned in the past, the primary concern was in the industrial zoning districts of where the facility would be, where there's a lot of, mixing of land uses where you wouldn't probably think it's a desirable use to have a school bus stop where there's a bunch of heavy equipment and other delivery trucks. So the commercial recreational district is a little bit different. It's more, think campground, think park your travel trailer there on a temporary basis. It's not really the same, but if the board doesn't feel that it's appropriate, I mean, you certainly could.
I don't have a problem. I think it's fine.
There's a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have discussion of the Will County zoning ordinance for signs, 155-13, which is dynamic displays, and dynamic displays, which is 155-13.7. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was asked to be assigned for this meeting, so I thought today I would just go over what the department has done and what the current regulations are on dynamic display brightness. In 2009, the county was confronted with the issue of dynamic displays, which is essentially a digital billboard, and then later on-premise dynamic display signage for businesses. At that time, when we were developing an ordinance, we worked with the Illinois Coalition for Responsible Outdoor Lighting to determine brightness levels, and that's the same group that helped Homer become certified as a dark skies community. So the main point of what that coalition tried to do was to get the county to think about establishing a brightness level that wouldn't be too bright, okay? Now, if they had their way, they'd probably say absolutely no dynamic displays. That would be the best case scenario. That's probably what they would have liked to achieve. There's 0 dynamic displays. But we worked with that group, and we were able to come up with some limits that the board felt comfortable with at the time, which was a 5,000 nits brightness during daytime hours, and 250 nits brightness and during nighttime hours. And to compare that to other jurisdictions, at the time when we were developing the ordinance, brightness levels that other jurisdictions allowed were 7,000 to 9,000 nits during the day and 500 nits at night. So Will County was actually one of the most restrictive communities that allowed billboards, but on the brightness level, one of the most restrictive by reducing the brightness to a level that even the Illinois Coalition for Responsible Outdoor Lighting was somewhat comfortable going with. So I feel that we did a good job at that time. If the committee thinks that there's a different number that we need to look at, I'd like some direction on where we should look at brightness, on like what part of the ordinance would they like changed, and some direction on what the staff should look at. We can bring back to the committee if that is the desire of the committee.
Good members, Rachel?
Yeah, so I'd like to see what you said at the time that when you passed it, it was 5,000 to 7,000 in surrounding areas. I'm assuming since then there have been counties that have passed similar. So I'd like to see what their numbers are, but then also what was Homer's number when they qualified for the dark skies? What was their numbers on their nighttime dynamic signs?
I'm not even certain that Homer Glen allows dynamic displays at all. I don't know that now.
So the other direction I would say is to look into areas that might have some sort of dark skies. If any of them allow the dynamic, what numbers they're recommending. If it's still 250, maybe it's less, maybe it's 100, 150. Daytime, I'm not too concerned about light pollution during the day. It's usually the night ones that's affecting, the environmental impacts of our ecology with animals and bugs that, get confused with the lights.
Steve?
Yeah, Homer is one of 2 cities in the entire world that's dark sky. So, yeah, it is. Homer, and there's one other city, and that's it. So, if you want to adopt Homer's rules for Will County unincorporated, then you also get all the consequences of all the businesses that are constantly getting aggravated with the cost for that lighting when they want to come in. And then as a result, we don't have a lot of new business growth other than like more franchise type things. But it's hard to get businesses to come in because they don't like that light ordinance. Well, Jackie just showed me there's probably about 20 dark sky. Guess what? Homer says there's 2.
Got the 0.
Homer said there's 2.
Homer's confusing.
Okay, well, Jim?
Maybe there's only 2 that are totally restrictive, like Homer. Because, I mean, they have really, really hard restrictions on lights. They count lumens and, you know, there is, I don't know any dynamic signs in Homer. When you leave Homer, you go into Lockport, you see dynamic signs. And you drive by them and they're not that bright where they hurt your eyes or anything like that. But, you know, I'm one of those people that would say, like, you develop that based on other places. I don't know what 200 nits looks like. No, is that bright enough? Is it a waste of time for...
Is your cell phone by the microphone?
Sorry, that was me, I turned on my...
It's a waste, to me, it's a... If you're going to say 200 nits and then a sign company that owns that says, well, no one will see it, well, they won't build it.
Brian?
Right? So some of that stuff is necessary, like that fire department, we just passed, how many nits was that?
Brian? Did you have something that you wanted to, or Jim?
Well, here's what I wanted, actually I'm going to ask Brian. And at first I will say that, you know, when we looked at this originally, we were looking at we were focused on really the big billboard signs as far as the lumens and the nits, and it went on for quite a while. But here's the distinction I think that we have not made. We put all digital signs in dynamic sign category. There are some signs, like the one at the fire department, and I've seen others, they're basically digital signs with a scrolling message. You know, I think what we need to do is say those are not dynamic signs. Not that you wouldn't necessarily still regulate the nits and so forth on them. But I think we need to make a distinction what is truly a dynamic sign and what is a digital sign. Because if we're going to put this restriction on digital signs, those are basically the signs that you see everywhere. So, you know, I think that maybe we just need to reclassify certain signs as not dynamic signs necessarily. Brian, you can comment on that. We wound up putting pretty much, if I'm incorrect, let me know, but we wound up putting almost all the digital type signs in that category of dynamic signs.
So, excuse me, yes, digital signs, like the one the fire district had that you came before you a few months ago, are all in that dynamic category. Dynamic signs is more than just digital, it's also anything with changeable copy. We don't really see a lot anymore of those tri-panels that rotate. That used to be a big thing years ago. They would all rotate at once and there'd be a new image. That's also something that's changeable copy. So that would be included. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier when I spoke was that we also took some work from a somewhat well-known light specialist in this field, Dr. Ian Lewin, PhD, and he had come up with some brightness levels and nits for actually like how you would view a digital display, and that if a display was a certain size, it would need to be a certain brightness so it would be legible in order to actually not cause an image to not be legible, which may cause driver distraction. So and those light brightness levels were all around 250 depending on the size of the billboard, and in some cases even a little bit above. So that was also taken into account when they established that number. Now again, that was 10 years ago. I don't know what's changed in that time frame. I haven't really looked at it since then. So I did want to share that with you too. And then also what we learned, we did a tour of several different signs 10 years ago, roughly, and also looking at on-premise signage and just building lighting. And what we had found was the billboards were actually coming in at the lower levels of these brightness levels. They'd be in the 100, the 200, 250 nit level. And what we found was that on-premise signage, like the McDonald's light, would be 800 nits. So the signage on the business was actually much brighter than the billboard. A few of the gas stations were coming in at 3,000 nits.
So how did
they were way brighter than anything that was assigned. That's just something we learned during our, our little outing where we traveled through different billboards and then looked at on-premise signage to compare them.
So I think that brings up two things. One's a question. Is this just for certain zoning types, or is it across the board, no matter where you're at, these dynamic signs have these limits?
Yes, the dynamic display brightness levels apply to billboards, which we call outdoor advertising in the zoning code, and then also to on-premise signage for businesses. Like, if you recall, I think it was just a month or two ago, we had Plainfield Township Park District in here on or Plainfield Park District on for a digital billboard, or digital on-premise sign, so it applies to that too.
So I do think that, I'd like to see down lighting in general, so signage, whether it's dynamic or not, if the Speedway sign, just using for example, is 3,000, and they put a little dynamic display, it's 250, well, we've kind of, not hit our goal on not putting the extra light up there. So I'd like to see that, how that applies to other lightage, and also, in the past, we've had these big parking lot lights that would just illuminate everything, and then we started to cap them, so it pushes the light down. I don't know, or do we have ordinances like that as well?
Yep, that was changed as well to require all lighting has to be down lighting when it comes to lighting of parking lots and other lighting features. And then it does exclude building code related lighting because there is some exit requirements that have to be a certain type of lighting.
Right.
And then it also looks at, we require a lighting plan with the commercial and industrial developments now for new stuff, where we look to make sure that all the lighting is contained on the site, and there's only, I think it's 0.1 foot candle off-site is the most that can be allowed, which is, I'd say, a pretty low standard compared to many other communities.
So something, the last point I was going to make was, I don't know if there's any desire of this board to maybe have where there is forest preserves or park districts, within so many 100 feet of those, and the lighting ordinances are different. Maybe that's a big headache to get into, but that would be something also to consider.
I mean, it sounds to me like our lighting ordinance is pretty solid. I mean, so I don't really know if it's the committee wants to pursue this further. I mean, we can, but it doesn't seem really
I
a
would
good
just
use
let it
of
alone
staff.
where it is. Just leave everything alone.